never thought a simple Craigslist purchase could turn my life upside down. But that fall of 2014 changed everything. I remember it like a photograph. The damp fog rolling over Ashland, Virginia, settling on the streets like it wanted to stay forever. I'd been scraping together what little money I could save, juggling a job that hung by a thread and a family that depended on me. My old laptop had finally died for good, freezing mid-email one too many times. The office was unforgiving. If I didn't finish my projects, I risked losing everything. And with a mortgage, bills, and Emily starting school, I didn't have the luxury of patience. I'd been burned by Craigslist before. There was the time I drove an hour for a like-new microwave that turned out to be rusty and useless, or the phone that never materialized after I sent the cash. Claire, my wife, was always there to remind me I had a problem trusting strangers. "Mark, one day it's going to go very wrong," she said. I'd smile, nod, and push her warning aside. Desperation has a way of bending caution into something malleable. Scrolling late one evening, bleary-eyed and annoyed at my old laptop's endless crashing, I found it. Dell Latitude laptop, $120, works perfectly, pickup only. A deal too good to ignore. The seller, Greg, responded within minutes. He insisted I come that night, and when I hesitated, he was unusually persuasive. The address was on the outskirts of town, down an old country road I barely recognized, the kind of road that seemed to vanish into the mist before your headlights. I arrived around 9 p.m., fog thick around my car. Dogs started barking somewhere in the shadows, their sounds echoing off the old houses that had been abandoned or left to decay. When I stepped out, Max, our golden retriever, stiffened, growling low. I laughed nervously, assuming it was just his instinct against strange streets. Greg greeted me at the door. Thin, pale, his eyes seemed tired, almost haunted. He led me to a dusty table with the laptop sitting on it. I booted it, feeling relief. It worked. Perfectly. That should have been enough. But then he smiled, and something in the way he said it made my stomach tighten. "You have a little girl, right? I've got something for her, no charge." He handed me a porcelain doll. Its dress was frayed, and its glassy eyes reflected the dim yellow light of the room. I hesitated. Emily would love it, I thought. Maybe this time Craigslist would be different. I took it home, ignoring the prickle of unease crawling along my spine. The first night passed quietly. I set the doll on Emily's desk, telling her it was a gift. She hugged it tight, smiled, and ran off to bed. But Max was different. He wouldn't leave the doll alone, growling and bristling whenever he got near it. I laughed it off as an animal instinct. Then the noises started. At first, subtle. Footsteps in the hallway, the soft creak of the floorboards. I told myself it was the old house settling or me imagining things, but Emily began to speak of another girl. "Daddy, there's a little girl in my room. She keeps asking me to play with her," she whispered one night. I froze. My heart raced. I ran upstairs, turning on every light, checking under the bed, in the closets. Nothing. Just the doll, sitting upright against the wall, staring. I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes following me. The next day, guilt and fear gnawed at me. I drove to St. Andrew's Church downtown, hoping Father Harold could make sense of it. He had known me since I was a kid. The moment I described the doll, his face darkened. "That house you went to, it's been empty for years," he said, leaning closer. "You didn't buy from a man, you brought something into your home, get rid of it tonight." I left shaken, the fog outside thicker than ever. I didn't wait. I drove the doll into the city and tossed it into a dumpster behind a grocery store. For the first time in days, our home felt quiet. I tried to convince myself it was over. Emily slept soundly, Max relaxed, and Claire didn't notice the tension in the house. But driving past that country road, I'd sometimes catch a glimpse of a pale figure near the trees, holding something small. My heart would hammer, and I'd press the accelerator harder, telling myself it was just imagination. I started noticing patterns I hadn't before. shadows that didn't belong, creaks too precise to be the house settling. I began checking the locks obsessively, watching Emily more closely. Every so often I thought I saw movement at the edge of the fog outside our window. One night I was up late fixing the kitchen sink. A soft sound made me turn. A faint whisper from Emily's room. "He took it," the voice said. "He took it away." I froze, knowing it wasn't Emily. My stomach churned as I imagined what the doll might have carried with it. Something wrong. I couldn't explain it rationally. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the house, every flicker of a shadow set my nerves on edge. I started researching the neighborhood's history, asking questions about the house I'd visited. I learned it had been abandoned for years, the owner dying mysteriously decades ago. Neighbors whispered of a child who vanished, though nothing official existed. The more I dug, the more unease settled in. I remembered the way Greg had smiled, the doll's lifelike eyes. It wasn't just old porcelain, it had presence. I could feel it. Even days later, the sight of dolls made my skin crawl. I swore I could sense something lingering, as if it had found a way to imprint itself on our home. I tried to protect Emily. We didn't bring any toys home for months, and yet, at night she would wake sometimes, staring at corners, whispering to friends I couldn't see. The house, once comforting, became a place of tension, as if every shadow was hiding something sinister. It wasn't until months later that things truly settled. One afternoon, I drove past that old road again, the fog curling around the trees. I slowed, heart hammering. For a second I thought I saw her, pale, holding a small doll, motionless by the roadside. I drove past quickly, refusing to look again. Sometimes desperation clouds judgment. Sometimes what seems like generosity or luck carries hidden consequences. I had ignored Claire's warnings, ignored my instincts, and brought something dangerous into our home. That night, when Emily hugged me tightly before bed, I realized how precious safety, caution, and trust are. I learned to be careful, to value intuition over bargains, and to respect warnings, even if they seem small. The world is full of things we cannot see, and sometimes the cost of ignoring them is more than we are willing to pay. I grew up in Maplewood, Oregon, a small suburb where nothing ever seemed to happen. People left their doors unlocked, neighbors waved from their lawns, and the biggest scandal I could remember as a kid was when old Mr. Daniels down the block got caught stealing flowers from the church garden. By the time I hit 31, I'd settled into a quiet rhythm that I thought would last forever. I worked full-time as a mechanic, came home to my modest little house, grilled steaks on Sundays, and watched football with my dog, Duke, at my feet. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. After years of driving a beat-up Nissan Sentra, I finally treated myself to a newer work truck. The Sentra had served me well, but I didn't need two cars sitting in my driveway. I figured $2,500 was fair, considering it still ran reliably, even with the rust along the doors and a busted radio that only worked on AM. I cleaned it up the best I could, took a dozen photos and posted it on Craigslist. I was honest in the description. 2002 Nissan Sentra, runs fine, some cosmetic damage, reliable commuter, $2,500 OBO. I even noted that the radio only picked up static. I figured honesty would save me time. Craigslist wasn't new to me. I'd sold tools, an old dirt bike, even a lawnmower there before. I knew the game. Lowball offers, no-shows, and scam artists who wanted to pay with cashier's checks that were faker than Monopoly money. I told myself I'd be cautious this time. The first responses came quick. One guy offered me $700. Cash tonight, take it or leave it. Another wanted me to deliver the car to Portland before he even agreed on a price. Most messages went nowhere, but one email stood out. It came from a guy named Troy. "I'll take it. Cash. When can I come?" That was it. No questions about mileage. No request for more pictures, no haggling. Just eagerness. My gut clenched. Something about it didn't feel right. I ignored it. Weeks passed, and the ad got stale. I almost forgot about it, until one night, close to midnight, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I rubbed my eyes, picked it up and froze. It was a photo, my Sentra, sitting in my own driveway, taken just minutes earlier. The caption, "Still for sale?" My chest went tight. I hadn't given out my address, but then it hit me. In the Craigslist photos, the car was parked in my driveway, my house number barely visible on the mailbox. I hadn't thought twice about it. Someone else had. Before I could react, a heavy knock echoed from the front door. 3 slow, deliberate bangs. I didn't move at first. My heart pounded in my ears, and Duke went ballistic in the back room, barking like he wanted to tear through the walls. Slowly, I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. A man stood on the porch. Stocky build, hood pulled up over his head, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He wasn't moving, just staring straight ahead like he was waiting me out. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking, and texted back, "Leave. Now." No reply. Another bang rattled the door, harder this time. Duke snarled, claws scraping against the hardwood as he fought to get closer. I backed away, debating whether to call the cops. But before I could make the call, silence fell. Then came the screech of tires out front. I waited 5 long minutes before daring to peek through the blinds. The street was empty. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me jump. When the sun finally came up, I stepped outside, exhausted, and felt my stomach drop. A fresh dent scarred the passenger side of the Sentra. Deep, ugly, the kind you couldn't buff out. I called the police. The officer who showed up was young, barely older than me, with a tone that made it clear he'd seen too many Craigslist-related complaints. He looked at the dent, scribbled a few notes, and muttered, "Craigslist is full of these psychos. We'll note it down, but don't expect much." I wanted to argue, to demand more, but what could I do? It wasn't like I had a plate number or security footage, just a dent and a bad feeling. That night, I deleted the ad. I emailed Craigslist support hoping they could trace the number, but all I got was an automated response thanking me for keeping the community safe. For the next week, I barely touched the Sentra. Every time I walked past it, the dent felt like a warning carved into the metal. I decided to take precautions. I bought motion-activated cameras and installed them around the house. I changed my phone number. I even parked the Sentra in the garage to keep it out of sight. My friends teased me for being paranoid, but none of them had stood frozen at midnight while a stranger banged on their door. Months passed, and nothing happened. Slowly, I started to relax again. I convinced myself maybe it had just been a one-off creep. Maybe he got bored and moved on to another unlucky seller. One Friday night, sitting on my couch scrolling Reddit, I came across a thread about Craigslist scams. Most were harmless stories. Fake checks, buyers who never showed, the usual. But one comment stopped me cold. It described a man in Oregon known for stalking Craigslist sellers. He'd scour photos for tiny clues, mailbox numbers, reflections in windows, street signs, and use them to track down addresses. Once he had the location, he'd show up unannounced. Sometimes he'd vandalize property. Other times he'd linger, watching from a distance. The commenter claimed police knew about him but hadn't caught him. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. The dent on the Sentra, the photo at midnight, the man in the hoodie. It wasn't random. It was a pattern, and I'd been part of it. I shut the laptop and sat in silence, Duke resting his head on my knee like he knew something was wrong. By summer, I'd given up on selling the Sentra. I could have listed it again, maybe on another site, maybe for a little less money, but every time I thought about it, my chest tightened. The idea of another stranger knowing where I lived was too much. One evening, a buddy of mine stopped by and asked why I still had the car. I shrugged, gave some excuse about wanting a backup vehicle, but the truth was simpler. I couldn't let it go. That dent wasn't just damage, it was a scar. Proof that someone had found me when I thought I was safe. I caught myself triple-checking the locks at night, watching the camera feeds before bed. Some mornings I'd wake up convinced I'd heard footsteps outside. Duke would bark at nothing, and I'd stand there gripping a baseball bat like a fool. But then, weeks would pass with nothing. I told myself I was paranoid. Life went back to normal. Work, bills, friends. On the surface, everything was fine. Until one night, almost a year later, I got a letter. No return address. Just a plain envelope slid under my door. Inside was a single piece of paper with 3 words typed in bold. Nice truck. Next? I called the police immediately. The officer who came out this time was older, more serious. He took the letter, studied it, and promised to forward it to a detective. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't lead anywhere. Whoever this man was, he knew how to stay just out of reach. I installed better locks. I upgraded the cameras. I even considered moving. But Maplewood was home. I refused to let some stranger drive me out. The Sentra still sits in my garage. I start it once a month to keep the battery alive. Every time I see that dent, I remember the knock on my door, the photo in my phone, the man in the hoodie staring straight ahead. People laugh when I tell them I won't sell cars online anymore. They call me paranoid, say I'm overreacting. But paranoia is just experience with teeth. And I'd rather be paranoid than naive. Safety isn't about trusting strangers to do the right thing. It's about protecting yourself from the possibility that they won't. The internet has made it easy to connect, but it's also given predators the tools to find us faster than ever. Never ignore the small details, because what feels harmless to you might be all someone else needs. Trust your instincts, guard your privacy, and remember, a quick sale or easy money isn't worth gambling your safety. Looking back now, I can see how reckless I was, but at 19, fresh out of my parents' house and convinced I was finally in control of my own life, I thought nothing could really happen to me. The truth was, I was broke, stressed, and a little too proud to admit how scared I felt living in a big city for the first time. My name is Rachel Myers, and in the fall of 2010, I was a freshman at the University of Illinois in Chicago. My scholarship covered tuition, but not much else. Rent drained what little savings I had, and my part-time job at the campus bookstore barely paid for groceries. After a few weeks of eating ramen and canned soup, I found myself sitting cross-legged on my dorm bed late one night, laptop balanced on my knees, scrolling Craigslist. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just wanted to see if there was a quick way to pick up a little extra cash. The personal section was weird enough that I clicked out almost immediately. I skimmed furniture ads, job postings, and then stumbled across something that froze me mid-scroll. Babysitter needed, $30 an hour, flexible schedule, local number, $30 an hour. That was more than double what I made at the bookstore. For a broke college kid, it was like dangling steak in front of a starving dog. I told myself it probably wasn't as good as it sounded. Maybe it was a typo, or maybe they wanted someone with years of experience. But my curiosity was hooked. I called the number. The voice that answered belonged to a woman, warm and friendly. She told me her name was Karen. She explained she needed someone to watch her 6-year-old daughter during her night shifts. She even apologized for the last-minute nature of it all. "We've been through 3 sitters already," she said, her voice lowering like a confession. "My daughter can be difficult." I should have caught the warning right then. But all I heard was $30 an hour. I agreed to meet the following night at 7. The next evening, I bundled into my jacket and caught the bus across town. The directions led me to the south side of the city, to a narrow street of dark, boarded-up row houses. The place didn't look like the kind of neighborhood where babysitters were paid $30 an hour. The house itself was silent. No porch light, no toys in the yard, no signs of a family living there. I checked the address twice, my stomach tightening. Before I could turn back, the door creaked open. A man stood there. He was tall, broad-shouldered, late 30s maybe. He gave me a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "You must be Rachel," he said. "My wife's running late. "Come in, you can wait inside." Every instinct screamed, "Don't step in." But I was 19, nervous and didn't want to seem rude. I hovered near the doorway, clutching my bag. Inside, the house was stripped bare. No furniture, no family photos, no sound of a child. Just a single dim lamp flickering in the corner. And then I saw the phone on the kitchen table. Its screen glowed with Craigslist, multiple draft babysitting ads, all with different names and numbers. My stomach knotted. I stammered something about coming back later when his wife was home. That's when his hand shot out, gripping my arm tight. His breath was hot against my cheek as he hissed, "Don't waste my time." I yanked free, bolted down the steps, and didn't stop running until I reached a gas station 2 blocks away. I locked myself in the restroom and shook until my teeth rattled. When I called the number back later that night, it was already disconnected. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it hadn't been that bad. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe it really was just some strange, socially awkward guy filling in for his wife. But deep down, I knew better. The image of that bare house and those draft ads glowed in my mind like a warning flare. I thought about going to the police, but what did I have to tell them? A disconnected number, a creepy guy, and a house I couldn't even be sure was his. No crime had technically been committed. He hadn't hurt me. He hadn't even followed me. So I did what a lot of scared people do. I tried to bury it. Classes kept me busy. Work kept me tired. Weeks passed, and I almost convinced myself to let it go. Then one night, I gave in to curiosity. I opened Craigslist again, typed babysitter, and there it was. The same ad, different phone number, slightly reworded, same pay, same vague description. That was when the full weight of it hit me. This wasn't just a weird encounter. This was deliberate. Whoever that man was, he was fishing, throwing out bait, waiting for someone desperate enough to bite. I never answered the ad again, but I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that someone else might. Some girl even younger than me, maybe without the street smarts or the luck to get away. I pictured her stepping into that same dark house, seeing that same glowing phone, but not making it out. I didn't tell my parents. They were already worried enough about me living in the city. My mom called every Sunday asking about my classes and if I was eating real food. If I told her, she'd demand I come home. My dad would have driven straight to Chicago with a baseball bat. Instead, I confided in my roommate, a junior named Madison. She listened wide-eyed as I spilled everything. When I finished, she shook her head. "Rachel, that's messed up. You need to tell someone." "Like who? The cops won't do anything." She chewed her lip. "Then at least warn people. Post about it. Put it online." It sounded logical, but I was terrified of being laughed at or, worse, ignored. Who was going to believe a 19-year-old freshman with no evidence? The night after our talk, I dreamt about the man's face, the way his grip tightened on my arm, the hiss in his voice. I woke up drenched in sweat, the word waste echoing in my head. By November, I'd stopped looking at Craigslist altogether. I focused on finals, on work, on anything that felt normal. But sometimes when I walked across campus after dark, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see him there. Watching, waiting. Winter break came, and I went home to my parents' place in Springfield. It should have been a relief, but I carried the weight of that night like luggage I couldn't set down. My mom fussed over me, fattened me up with home cooking, and I played along, laughing at her questions and avoiding the truth. But one afternoon, when my dad was flipping channels in the living room, a news story caught my ear. It was about a young woman in another state who'd been attacked after answering a Craigslist ad for a babysitter. My chest went cold. I excused myself and locked the bathroom door. I pressed my back against the wall and slid down to the floor, shaking. That could have been me. If I hadn't noticed the drafts on the phone. If I hadn't trusted my gut at the last second. When I returned to Chicago in January, I promised myself I wouldn't be so naive again. But promises are easy to make and hard to keep. Money was still tight. Rent was due. and temptation has a way of creeping back in. One night, Madison caught me scrolling through Craigslist again. She snatched the laptop from my lap. "Are you insane?" she snapped. "Do you have a death wish?" "I'm just looking," I muttered. She glared at me. "Looking is how you end up back at that house. You want $30 an hour? Fine. I'll help you find a campus job. But you are not answering some shady ad from a stranger." Her anger jolted me, but underneath it was fear. She didn't want to lose me to a mistake. I nodded, ashamed. "Okay. You're right." For the rest of that semester, I stayed away from Craigslist. I worked extra shifts at the bookstore. I cut back on spending. Life settled into a routine again. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't finished. In April, while walking to class, I spotted a flyer taped to a lamppost. It was for a missing girl, a 19-year-old from another Chicago college. She'd vanished after telling her roommate she was going to a babysitting job she found online. My stomach dropped. The description was chillingly familiar. A too-good-to-be-true offer, a vague posting, a local number. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the flyer, the girl's face smiling back at me. I felt sick. I couldn't pretend anymore that my experience had been some isolated creep. This was a pattern, a predator, maybe even the same man. I called the tip line. My voice shook as I told the operator everything I remembered. The ad, the phone call, the man, the empty house, the glowing phone with its draft listings. She listened carefully, asked me questions, and thanked me for calling. For the first time since that night, I felt like I'd done something useful. Like maybe my fear could help someone else. A detective followed up a week later. He asked me to drive with him past the neighborhood where I'd gone. I pointed out the house. It looked even more abandoned than I remembered. Weeds creeping up the steps, boards nailed over the windows. He wrote everything down. I don't know what came of it. Maybe nothing. Maybe the lead went cold. But sharing the story lifted something heavy off my chest. Years have passed since then, but I still think about it. I think about how close I came to stepping inside that house, about the strength in his grip and the menace in his voice. I think about the missing girl whose flyer I saw. Did she walk through a door like that? Did she ignore the warning bells the way I almost did? I don't scroll Craigslist anymore. The world has moved on to other apps, but danger doesn't care what platform it uses. It just adapts. When I tell this story now, people sometimes ask why I didn't fight back, why I didn't scream. But fear doesn't work that way. It seeps into your bones, it clouds your mind, and all you want is to escape. I was lucky. That's all. And that's the hardest part to swallow. That my survival came down to luck. Loneliness, desperation, and need can make us ignore the warnings that should keep us safe. But no amount of money is worth stepping into a situation that feels wrong. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And never be ashamed to walk away, even if it means losing out. The internet may offer opportunities, but it also hides predators who count on our silence. Speaking up, sharing our stories, might be what saves the next person. I used to think I had a decent head on my shoulders. I wasn't reckless, didn't take stupid risks, and I liked to believe I could sniff out trouble before it came too close. But the truth is, trouble doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it slides in through the cracks of your ordinary life, wearing a friendly smile and speaking in a voice that sounds just like anyone else's. The summer of 2017 was already hard on us. My wife Julia had been recovering from surgery, the bills stacking higher than we could keep up with. I worked long hours at a warehouse, and while the paycheck kept us afloat, there wasn't much left over. We cut corners where we could, eating at home, holding off on vacations, and stretching the life of things we owned until they gave up on us. One of those things was the old LG television sitting in our living room. It was a 55-inch LED, not top of the line anymore, but still working fine. We'd just managed to buy a new flat screen on sale, and I figured the old one could fetch us a little cash. $300 might not sound like much to some folks, but to us it meant the electric bill or a couple weeks of groceries. I posted the ad on Craigslist that same evening. LG 55. LED TV, good condition, $300, pickup only. Nothing fancy, just the truth. A couple hours later, my phone buzzed with a message. Hey, this still available. Name's Mitch. I can grab it tonight if you're free. Busy schedule, I'll make it worth your while. His tone was polite, maybe a little pushy, but I'd dealt with worse. I told Julia about it while she was rinsing dishes. Tom, she said, shaking her head, I don't like that. Meeting a stranger this late? People get hurt that way. We'll be smart, I told her. Public place, broad daylight next time. It's not broad daylight, she reminded me. She was right, but I convinced myself it'd be fine. We'll meet him at the Speedway on Broad Street. Gas station, cameras, people coming and going. What could happen? Julia sighed, drying her hands on a dish towel. I still don't like it, but I know we need the money. By 10 o'clock we had the TV strapped into the back of the SUV, our son Lucas wedged beside it. He was 16, lanky, always rolling his eyes when his parents dragged him into their errands. But he came along without much complaint that night. The three of us drove out, headlights cutting through the muggy darkness, none of us knowing what was waiting for us. The Speedway lot was mostly empty when we pulled in. A couple cars at the pumps, some teenager leaning against his hatchback scrolling his phone, the buzzing of old lights overhead. We parked under one of the brighter lamps and waited. A few minutes later, a white van pulled up. The driver hopped out with a smile that looked more rehearsed than natural. Baseball cap pulled low, jeans worn at the knees, maybe mid-30s. You Tom? He asked, walking over with an easy stride. Yeah. You Mitch? That's me. He peeked in the back of the SUV, running a hand over the TV frame like it was something precious. Looks good. Real good. But here's the thing, my van's not set up for this. No way I can squeeze it in here without scratching it to hell. My place is right around the corner though, 2 minutes tops. If you follow me, we can unload it easy. Julia touched my arm. I could hear the quiet alarm in her voice when she whispered, Tom, I don't like this. This isn't what you said. I hesitated. The smart move would have been to shut it down right there. Tell Mitch no thanks, the deal's off. But $300 hung heavy in my mind. The kid needed new school clothes. The electric bill was late and I didn't want to walk away empty-handed. We'll just follow him, I told Julia. Get it done quick. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't push it. Lucas shifted in his seat, uneasy but silent. So we followed Mitch's van out of the gas station and onto side streets that grew darker and emptier the further we drove. Streetlights thinned out. Houses turned to warehouses. Warehouses to lots overrun with weeds. Finally, the van slowed and turned down a gravel road. At the end stood a hulking abandoned building. Windows smashed out, graffiti covering the walls like scars. My stomach nodded. This doesn't look right, Julia muttered. Still, I parked. The second I stepped out, I knew I'd made a mistake. Shadows peeled away from the edges of the warehouse. 3 men appeared, moving with the kind of certainty that told me this wasn't their first time. One had a crowbar, another a pistol glinting under the streetlight. Phones. Wallets. Now. The gunman's voice was calm, almost bored. Julia froze, clutching Lucas's hand. I lifted my hands halfway, trying to keep my voice steady. Take the TV, that's all we're here for. Just take it and we'll go. The man with the pistol pressed it against my chest. Cold steel. My heart hammered so loud I swore it might burst. I said everything. My fingers fumbled at my pocket, pulling out my wallet. Julia's phone slipped from her shaking hand as she held it out. Lucas's eyes were wide, terrified, but he obeyed too. In less than a minute, everything we owned worth stealing was gone. They yanked the TV from the SUV, tossed it into the van and sped off, gravel spitting under the tires. We stood there in silence, stunned. The warehouse loomed behind us like a skeleton of bad decisions. Finally, I forced my hands to stop shaking long enough to grab the wheel and drive us away. The Columbus police station was half empty when we stumbled in, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. An officer behind the desk looked up, unimpressed, as though he'd heard it all before. "What happened?" he asked, pen poised. I told him everything. The Craigslist ad, the gas station, the warehouse, the men with the gun. His expression didn't change. He just scribbled notes, asked for descriptions, and finally leaned back in his chair. "These guys hit people all the time," he said. "They use burner phones, vans nobody can trace, hard to catch." That was it. No promises, no urgency. Just a shrug dressed in a badge. We drove home in silence. Julia double-checked every lock before bed, then checked them again. Lucas refused to go anywhere alone, jumping every time a van passed him on the street. And me? I lay awake night after night, staring at the ceiling, replaying Julia's whisper over and over. "I don't like this." Months passed, but the fear never really left us. The living room felt emptier without the TV, but it wasn't just about losing the set or the money. It was about the trust we'd lost, the belief that ordinary life was safe, that meeting a stranger in a parking lot couldn't spiral into something out of a nightmare. One afternoon, while driving Lucas to practice, I passed the lot where that warehouse had stood. It had been torn down, the rubble cleared, grass already starting to grow where concrete once crumbled. Still, when I looked over, I swore I could see shadows moving in the corners, waiting for someone else to follow them inside. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and forced my eyes back to the road. No amount of money is worth ignoring your gut, or the voice of someone who loves you. Danger doesn't always look dangerous at first. Sometimes it comes wearing a smile, promising quick cash or convenience. But if something feels wrong, it probably is. And the real cost of ignoring that feeling isn't a lost TV or a stolen wallet. It's the safety of the people who matter most. People talk about gut feelings like they're some kind of mystical compass, but I think they're really just common sense dressed up with hindsight. Most of the time you don't realize your gut was screaming until after the fact, when you're replaying everything like a bad movie. For me, it all started with a car I should have gotten rid of years earlier. My 2004 Honda Civic had been with me since high school. Faded blue paint, the backseat stitching coming apart, and a crack running across the dashboard like an old scar. But it ran, and for a long time that was all that mattered. By spring of 2018, though, I'd finally upgraded. I worked as a delivery driver, and the Civic just wasn't cutting it for the long hours and constant miles. I'd bought a newer SUV that could handle the workload, and the Civic sat in my driveway collecting pollen. My girlfriend, Lisa, kept nudging me. "Michael," she said one morning over coffee, "either sell that thing or plant flowers in it. It looks like it's been parked there since the Bush administration." She wasn't wrong. So I took a few photos with my phone and threw together a Craigslist ad. 2004 Honda Civic, 160k miles, good condition, paid $800 OBO. I didn't think much about the background. Our house number was visible, and our neighbor's yard was clear as day. I figured, who cares? It's just a car ad. The first reply came within hours. A man named Daniel called, his voice smooth, polite. "I'm in town on business," he said, "looking for something cheap and reliable. Your Civic sounds perfect. Can we meet tonight?" Something about how quick it all was should have given me pause. But when you're staring at bills on the fridge and your bank account feels like it's mocking you, you don't get picky about miracles. We agreed to meet in my driveway. Looking back, that was mistake number one. Lisa raised an eyebrow when I told her. "You don't even know this guy," she said. "What if he's a creep?" He sounded normal, I shrugged. Besides, it's a Civic, not a Maserati. No one's plotting a heist over it. That evening, right around 7, a silver rental car pulled up. Out stepped Daniel, mid-30s, clean-shaven button-down shirt tucked into dark jeans. He looked like an accountant or a salesman, someone you wouldn't think twice about passing in a grocery store. "Michael, good to meet you," he said, shaking my hand firmly. He walked around the car, nodding appreciatively. "Body looks decent. How's it run?" "Dependable," I said. "Been mine since high school. Never stranded me once." We made small talk while I handed him the keys for a test drive. First, I drove us around the block. Then we swapped seats, and he took the wheel. That's when things felt off. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him holding his phone lower than usual, angling it toward the console where I'd left my wallet and ID. Later, while parked back in my driveway, I caught the faint reflection of his phone camera pointing at me in the car window. It was subtle, quick, like he'd done it 100 times. "You okay?" I asked, forcing a laugh. "Yeah, just checking some emails," he said casually. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, who pays cash for a used car just to mess around taking photos? Back at my house, he handed me an envelope thick with bills. 1,800 like we said. He didn't haggle, didn't even flinch. "Pleasure doing business with you." It almost felt too easy. That night I was still grinning when I counted the cash on the kitchen table. Lisa sat across from me, not sharing the mood. "Something about that guy rubbed me wrong," she said. "Too smooth. And why no haggling? Who pays full price on Craigslist?" "Maybe he just needed a car fast," I shrugged. "Not everyone's looking for a bargain." By midnight, my relief shattered. An email pinged on my phone from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Stolen property." I opened it. "That car you sold me was stolen property. You'll pay me back double, or I'll report you. Don't test me. I know where you live." Attached was a photo of my driveway taken earlier that evening. My hands shook as I showed the screen to Lisa. "What the hell is this?" Her face went pale. "Michael, this isn't a joke. Call the police." I did. The officer who answered was polite enough, but dismissive. "Sir, if you sold him the car for cash, that's a civil matter. We can't trace emails like that. If you get another threat, let us know." Another threat came the very next day. A text this time. "Nice schedule. Long shifts. Easy to find you." Attached was my delivery route, pulled straight from the company website. By the end of the week, another photo arrived. This one of Lisa, leaving for her night shift at the hospital. Underneath the words, "Pretty girlfriend. Careful walking alone." That was when the fear really set in. We stopped sleeping through the night. Every sound outside had us peeking through the blinds. Lisa refused to leave the house alone, and when she did, I trailed behind like a shadow. "Michael," she whispered one night as we sat in the dark living room. "What if he's watching us right now?" I didn't answer, because I thought the same thing. The police offered little comfort. The detective I spoke with in person barely looked up from his desk. "Look, burner phones, throwaway emails, these guys vanish quick. Without a direct threat of violence or proof of extortion, our hands are tied." "What do you call this?" I snapped, tossing the latest email on his desk. He glanced at the photo of Lisa walking into the hospital. "Creepy, yeah, but technically not illegal." I left feeling smaller than when I walked in. After that, the messages stopped as suddenly as they started. The number disconnected. The emails went silent. Whoever Daniel was, he vanished with my car and my peace of mind. Months passed, but the damage lingered. I sold nothing online after that. Not a lamp, not a bike, nothing. Lisa made me take down our address from everything on the internet, even old Facebook photos. Still, I caught myself scanning every car that slowed near the house. I memorized license plates, studied faces, and jumped at shadows. Lisa eventually insisted we move apartments just to feel safe again. Sometimes, when I drive past a stranger photographing a car in a parking lot, I feel my stomach knot. I wonder if Daniel was just one man pulling a scam, or part of something bigger. Some ring that thrives on people like me, desperate for quick cash and blind to the red flags. I'll never know. And maybe that's what terrifies me most, that someone could step so casually into your life, take what they want, and disappear without leaving a trace. When you invite strangers into your world, even for something as ordinary as selling a car, you're opening doors you may not be able to close. Always protect your privacy, Trust your instincts, and remember that no pile of cash is worth the cost of living in fear. I used to think my life would amount to more than a Rust Belt routine of night shifts and damp apartments, but by November of 2014, that's all I had. My name's Ethan Caldwell, and at 29 I felt more like 50. I lived alone in Brookdale, Pennsylvania, a factory town that had bled itself dry long before I was old enough to vote. Main Street was lined with payday loan shops, pawn stores, and bars that never turned off the neon. My father had worked in one of the last steel plants until a busted back forced him out. He died 2 winters before this story, and I never really climbed out of that hole. I once played in a band. We toured crappy clubs, sleeping in vans, believing we'd make it to bigger stages. When we broke apart, I slid back into town with nothing to show but a guitar I barely touched anymore. My ex, Laura, told me she couldn't keep living in a ghost town. She left for New York, and I let her walk. Truth is, I didn't fight for much of anything back then. My apartment smelled like damp carpet and fried food from the neighbors. The only living thing that stuck by me was Spindle, my cat, who was as old and bitter as the town itself. Most nights after clocking out from the packaging warehouse, I'd sit hunched over my laptop, mindlessly scrolling Craigslist. It was a pathetic ritual, checking out used guitars, odd jobs, and sometimes the personal section. I told myself it was boredom, but really it was loneliness. That night I stumbled across an ad under Casual Encounters. The headline read, "No strings, just connection. Tonight." The poster called herself Alina, 27. Her photo wasn't glamorous, grainy, bad lighting, nothing staged. Maybe that's why it hooked me. Most ads were fake, polished scams, but this felt raw. I lingered, hesitated, then hit reply. We traded a handful of messages. She wasn't chatty, but her words felt real. Short, almost shy. I asked where she was, and after a pause, she sent an address. 142 Birchwood Hollow Road. A rural house I knew vaguely, out past the old rail tracks. Half an hour drive. I sat there staring at the screen, remembering the time I'd been ripped off chasing a cheap Gibson guitar on Craigslist. Lost $300 I couldn't afford. I'd promised myself never again. But her messages, they had a pull. Loneliness does that. By 12:15 a.m. I was on the road, headlights cutting through the fog, Spindle asleep on the couch behind me. Part of me kept whispering, "Turn back." But I pushed on. The farther I drove, the quieter it got. No gas stations, no open diners, just long stretches of road swallowed by fog. Birchwood Hollow Road was worse. Narrow gravel, lined with sagging trees. My tires crunched loud enough to make me nervous. Her house sat crooked at the end of the drive, paint peeling, a rusted swing set leaning like it was about to give up. A single light glowed upstairs, but no car in the driveway. I killed the engine and sat there, hands tight on the wheel. The windows looked strange, too dark, like someone was standing just beyond them. I shook it off. Nerves. When I finally walked up, the door opened before I could knock. Alina stood there, thin, pale, long dark hair over her face. She smiled faintly, almost apologetic, and motioned me in. Inside, the air reeked of mold and smoke. The living room was stripped bare, just a couch with torn fabric and a TV that wasn't even plugged in. I sat awkwardly, pretending not to notice. She didn't talk much, just little half smiles. Every few seconds, I heard a sound from the back, like someone dragging a foot across the floor. Heavy, deliberate. "What's that?" I asked. "Pipes," she said quickly, giving a quiet laugh. But the sound grew louder, closer. My chest tightened. Something wasn't right. "I'm not feeling great," I muttered, standing. "Think I should go?" I turned for the door just as a loud bang shook the yard. Then came the crack of a Ur gunshot. Glass shattered next to me, spraying shards across the floor. My ears rang. Outside, shadows moved fast around my car. A hiss rose in the night, tires deflating. My only way out, gone. Panic hit like a punch. I bolted toward the back, heart hammering. Alina's voice shifted, shrill with laughter, echoing through the house. Behind me, the dragging footsteps turned into a rush. I slammed through the kitchen, shoved the back door open, and sprinted into the woods. Branches clawed at my arms, mud slick under my boots. Voices shouted behind me, men's voices, rough and angry. "Get him!" one barked. I ran blind, lungs burning. Every crack of a branch felt like a gunshot chasing me. My mind screamed I wouldn't make it, that this was where it ended, shot down in some forgotten patch of Pennsylvania woods because I was dumb enough to answer a Craigslist ad. I tripped hard, smashing my knee into a root. Pain flared, but adrenaline shoved me back up. Behind me, laughter cut through the night. Not Alina's this time, but deeper, mocking. Somewhere in the chaos, headlights flared ahead, a long stretch of road. I stumbled toward it, arms waving. By some miracle, a semi slowed, brakes hissing. The driver, a big guy with a trucker cap, leaned out. "Jesus Christ, kid, what the hell?" "Help," I gasped. "Gun. Someone's—" He didn't need more. He pulled me up into the cab, locked the doors, and grabbed his CB. My chest heaved as he called the sheriff, voice steady like he'd seen worse. I sat there trembling, watching the tree line, waiting for shapes to emerge. But nothing came, just the quiet woods, swallowing the screams I thought I still heard. By the time the sheriff's cruisers arrived, my body was shaking so hard I could barely hold water from the trucker's thermos. We drove back to the property, lights flashing against the fog. I half expected gunfire to erupt, but when the deputies went in, they found nothing. No Alina, no men, no furniture. The house was stripped bare like no one had lived there in years. Sheriff Daniels, a barrel-chested man with tired eyes, came back shaking his head. "Bank-owned. Been empty a long while." I told him everything, about the ad, the address, the messages. One deputy scrolled Craigslist on his phone, frowning. "Nothing there now. Ad's gone." Daniels sighed. "Not the first time. These guys set fake posts, lure people out, then hit them. Sometimes robbery, sometimes worse." He looked me dead in the eye. "You're lucky you ran." Lucky. That word stuck in my throat like a stone. They filed a report, but I knew how it would end. Another dead lead. By dawn, I was back in my apartment, spindle curling around my legs like nothing happened. I sat there in the dim light, still smelling the woods, still hearing the laughter. For weeks I couldn't sleep. Every night I jolted awake, convinced someone stood at my window. I deleted my Craigslist account, shut the laptop for good. But shutting off the internet didn't quiet the fear. Months passed, but the night never really left me. I carried pepper spray in my pocket at work, checked my locks twice before bed, jumped at every knock on the door. Brookdale already felt like a cage, and now the shadows pressed closer. I kept replaying her face, the faint smile when she opened the door. It hadn't looked forced, it hadn't looked like a trick. And that thought chilled me most of all. If she was a decoy, she was damn convincing. But if she wasn't, if she was part of something darker, something she wanted, then there were people out there using loneliness as bait. One night, sitting on the couch with Spindle purring against my leg, I realized I'd come within inches of being another name on a missing persons list. My father used to say Brookdale ate people alive, just slower than the city did. I wondered if he'd been right. I never saw Alina again. Never knew if that was her real name. Never knew what they wanted. Money, a car, or blood. All I know is that I walked away. And some nights, that doesn't feel like survival. It feels like unfinished business. Loneliness can blind you, and trust given too easily can cost more than money. It can cost your life. The internet offers quick connections, but behind a screen, anyone can wear a mask. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Walk away before it's too late, because no promise of comfort or connection is worth stepping into a trap you may never escape. Looking back, I think that fall of 2012 was one of the happiest stretches of our lives. We just moved into a bigger house in Morgantown, and even though it wasn't perfect, drafty windows, squeaky floors, and a yard that needed more raking than mowing, it felt like a step forward. For years, my husband Dave and I had talked about finding a place with enough space for the kids to grow into. And now here we were. The timing felt right. Sophie had just turned 6, which to her meant she was practically a grown-up. Our older boy Matthew was 9 and always leaving Legos scattered across every inch of the old house. The new place gave us room to breathe, to spread out, and to imagine a future we'd worked hard to get to. But it also meant money was tighter than ever. Mortgage payments, moving costs, and a long list of must-buys for the house drained us quick. That's where Craigslist came in. I'd never been one for yard sales or second-hand shops, but once I realized how much we could save, I was hooked. We bought a couch for $75, a solid wood dresser for Matthew's room for $30, and Sophie's bunk bed for free from a young couple moving out of town. Every time we loaded something into Dave's pickup, I felt like we were winning some unspoken game of survival. But deep down, I also knew I had a tendency to ignore my gut when chasing a bargain. Growing up, my mother always told me, cheap can cost you more than money if you're not careful. I'd laughed at the time, but I carried those words with me. In late November, on a gray, overcast morning when the air smelled like snow, I remembered them more than ever. That morning, while sipping my coffee at the kitchen table, I found a Craigslist ad that seemed too good to pass up. A queen-sized wooden bed frame for $50. It looked sturdy, clean. Nothing fancy, but exactly what we needed for our new guest room. I sent a quick message, expecting to wait hours or even a day for a reply. Instead, I got an answer almost immediately. Please come today. Tonight if you can. I'll give you a discount if you don't wait. I frowned at the urgency. Nobody gives discounts for being in a hurry. Still, I showed the ad to Dave. His eyes lit up. That's a steal. Let's get the truck and go. Something in me hesitated. Maybe it was the way the message felt rushed, like the seller was desperate to lock me in before I could think twice. When I asked for the address, he gave me directions that felt more like a dare than an invitation. It's out past the river. Keep going until you hit a gravel road. No stores nearby, you'll see a mailbox with peeling blue paint. Can we meet halfway? I typed back, suggesting the Walmart parking lot on the main strip. His reply came quick, clipped, almost sharp. No, you come here, otherwise forget it. That was it. No explanation, no attempt to negotiate. Just an order. I stared at the screen for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Something in my stomach twisted tight. I thought about the kids upstairs, about the money we'd been scraping together, about all the little corners we'd cut to make this new house a home. And then I thought about that gravel road past the river out where nobody could hear a thing. Dave came in carrying a laundry basket, already picturing how we'd load the bed frame into the truck. Ready to go? I closed the laptop with a snap. We're not going. What? Why not? His brow furrowed. The guy's pushing too hard. Won't meet in town. I don't like it. He sighed, frustrated but not angry. It's $50, honey. You're being too cautious. Maybe, I said quietly. But we'll find another one. I'm not risking it. Something in my tone must have told him this wasn't up for debate because he didn't press. We ended up spending the rest of the day raking leaves and making hot chocolate for the kids. By nightfall, the bed frame had already slipped from my mind. 3 weeks later, I was folding laundry in the living room when the evening news crackled on. Dave was in his recliner, half asleep, when the anchor's voice sharpened. Breaking tonight, authorities have arrested a man accused of luring victims through Craigslist ads. A retired couple from Preston County disappeared earlier this month after responding to a listing for farm equipment. Police say the suspect arranged to meet them at a remote property, then murdered them and disposed of their bodies. I froze with a shirt in my hands. The screen flashed images of the area. The road name hit me like ice water down my spine. It was the exact same one I'd been given. Dave sat up straight. Wait, didn't that guy? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I dropped the laundry and pressed my hands to my face, my whole body trembling. That could have been us. The anchor kept talking, but I barely heard. All I could think about was how easily I'd brushed it off, how close we had come to being a headline. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat on the couch staring at the darkened windows. "We're done with Craigslist," I said firmly to Dave. My voice shook, but my words didn't. "From now on, if we can't buy it in a store or meet in a crowded place, we don't buy it." He nodded without argument. For once, there was no grumbling about money, no sighing about missed deals. Just silence and a hand squeezing mine. Life went on, but I never scrolled Craigslist the same way again. Every ad felt like a trap. Every eager reply read like a warning. When friends mentioned deals they'd found online, I bit my tongue. How could I explain that I wasn't afraid of being ripped off? I was afraid of not coming home. Sophie grew older, and so did Matthew. They never knew the full story, at least not then. But they noticed how cautious I became. Whenever Dave mentioned buying something secondhand, I'd jump in with alternatives. Yard sales, thrift stores, or just doing without. Sometimes at night I'd replay the what-ifs in my head. What if I hadn't trusted that twisting in my gut? What if I'd let Dave drive us out past the river, kids at home waiting for us, never knowing we wouldn't come back? The thought haunted me, but it also anchored me. It reminded me that instincts aren't silly. They're survival. Years later, Sophie asked me why I always got tense when someone brought up Craigslist. She was a teenager by then, tall and sharp-eyed, already pushing boundaries the way teenagers do. "Mom," she said one evening, "why do you freak out about that site? Everyone uses it. What's the big deal?" I hesitated, staring at her across the dinner table. I thought about telling her everything, about the ad and the road and the news report. Instead, I just said one line, my voice low and trembling. Because I trusted my gut once, and it saved us all. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't argue. She just nodded, like some part of her understood. And in that moment, I realized that maybe the real story wasn't about what almost happened to us. It was about what didn't. Sometimes that small voice in your gut is the only thing standing between ordinary life and unthinkable tragedy. No bargain is worth risking your safety. When I think back to the summer of 2009, I picture the fog rolling in off the Pacific, swallowing the docks and turning our little coastal town into something half asleep, half haunted. My name's Mason Ellis, and I was 12 years old then, old enough to wander, young enough to believe I was invincible. We lived in North Bend, Oregon, a town where everyone knew your name, but the streets could still feel empty, like the ocean was slowly reclaiming us. After my parents divorced, the house felt emptier still. Mom was always gone, working double shifts at the diner on Main Street, her hair smelling like fried clams and coffee when she finally stumbled home. That left my sister Riley in charge. She was 17, 5 years older, but sometimes she felt more like my mom than my sister. She had this fierce way of watching over me, like she could stand between me and every bad thing in the world if she just tried hard enough. I didn't make her job easy. I was obsessed with building forts, collecting random junk for projects. Old buckets, broken chairs, planks of driftwood from the shore. I turned our backyard into a junkyard kingdom. Riley called me a hoarder in training. I called myself an architect. That's how I ended up on Craigslist in the first place. Our family computer was this clunky desktop with a humming tower that overheated if you ran too many windows. I'd type free stuff into Craigslist and scroll through endless junk people wanted to unload. Most of it was trash, but one day I spotted a giant plastic storage bin, perfect for the foundation of my newest fort. The seller's name was Tony R. He wrote he was cleaning out his garage and had stuff cheap. His email was short, no details beyond an address. I begged Riley to message him back for me. She crossed her arms, squinting at the screen like she could see straight through him. "Craigslist is full of creeps," she said. "We'll tell him to meet us at Safeway. If he says no, forget it." I felt my cheeks burn. It was embarrassing, her talking like that, but I knew better than to argue too hard. So she typed the email firm and sharp. "Public place only. No exceptions." Tony's reply came quick. Too quick, maybe. He said the bin was too heavy to move. We'd have to come to his house. He promised it was safe. Promised. I read the word over and over. To me, it sounded like reassurance. To Riley, it sounded like a red flag. Nope, she said, shaking her head. That's it. He's done. I slumped in my chair, embarrassed all over again. You're being paranoid. He's probably just some old guy cleaning out junk. Maybe. But we're not going to his house. That should have been the end of it. I sulked, went outside, tried hammering boards together in the yard. But that night, curiosity pulled me back to the computer. When I refreshed our email, my stomach dropped. The message was short. You live near 163 Bayberry Street, right? Not far from the docks. I hadn't given him our address. Neither had Riley. My throat tightened. I yelled for her, and when she read the email, the color drained from her face. How the hell does he know where we live? She whispered. She slammed the laptop shut, her jaw clenched. Lock every window, every door now. We spent the next hour sealing the house, curtains drawn, lights off. I tried to make jokes, but my hands shook on the locks. Riley's voice was sharp but thin, like she was covering her own fear. When night fell, the fog outside thickened, the kind that swallowed sound. I kept glancing at the streetlight outside, watching the glow shrink in the mist. Then came the knock. Slow, deliberate, on the front door. Riley pressed a finger to her lips. Don't make a sound. The knock came again, harder. The wall seemed to shake. My stomach turned to ice. Then came the scrape. Metal against the doorknob, testing it, trying to force it. I scrambled back, nearly tripping. Riley shoved me toward the hallway. Bathroom, go, now. I crawled under the sink, curling up small, pressing my hands to my ears. I could still hear the pounding, echoing through the house. Then silence. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then came the sound I'll never forget. The slow slide of a window opening at the back of the house. Footsteps creaked across the living room floor. My chest seized. I bit my fist to keep from crying out. And then I heard his voice. Deep, calm, almost friendly. It's just me, Tony. Don't be scared. Every hair on my body stood up. The footsteps came closer down the hall. Riley's breathing quickened. I could hear it, even though she was across the room. She had her phone out, her thumb trembling as she dialed 911. She whispered into the receiver, voice shaking. The bathroom doorknob rattled. Slowly, deliberately. I could see the shadow moving under the door. Then out of nowhere, another sound, wood splintering, a door slamming open. Our neighbor Hank, an old fisherman with a crooked back and a mean swing, burst in through the side door. He carried a baseball bat, and he didn't hesitate. He swung with a grunt, connecting with something solid. The man cursed, stumbled. Riley yanked me from under the sink as Hank roared, "Get the hell out of here!" The intruder snarled but bolted, disappearing into the fog before the police even arrived. When the flashing lights finally painted our street red and blue, I thought I'd feel safe. But even surrounded by uniforms, my skin prickled. The man's voice echoed in my head. Don't be scared. The police took statements, searching the house with flashlights. One of them, Officer Grant, crouched down to my level. "You did the right thing calling us," he said. His voice was kind, but his eyes looked tired, like he'd seen too many kids like me shaking in too many bathrooms. They told us the man's name, Craig Landon, a drifter. He had a record, mostly stalking charges. They said he'd been using Craigslist ads to find victims, kids, families, anyone who'd take the bait. He was gone before they got there. No car, no trace, just swallowed by the fog. Riley hugged me tight that night, tighter than she ever had. She whispered, "I'll never let anything happen to you." Her voice cracked when she said it, and I realized she was just a kid too, standing between me and the dark. Mom came home the next morning, pale and furious. She blamed herself for leaving us alone. Within a week, she packed our things and sent us inland to live with our aunt. North Bend no longer felt like home. It felt like a place that had almost eaten us alive. Years later, I still can't stand the sound of knocking after dark. Even a delivery driver's polite tap on the door makes my stomach twist. I stopped building forts, stopped scavenging junk for projects. The fun of it, the innocence, was gone. Craigslist was no longer a site for treasures but a shadow, a reminder of the man who found us through it. Riley grew up fast after that summer. She never forgave herself for even replying to him, though it wasn't her fault. She saved me. If Hank hadn't shown up, if Riley hadn't dialed the phone, I don't know what would have happened. Sometimes late at night I still hear it, that calm, steady voice seeping through the dark. It's just me, Tony. Don't be scared. But I was scared. We both were. And we had every right to be. The internet makes strangers feel close, but closeness doesn't equal trust. Behind a screen, anyone can pretend to be safe, honest, or friendly. In reality, predators hide in plain sight, waiting for those too young or too lonely to let their guard down. Never share personal information with strangers online. Never go where your instincts scream not to, and never ignore the ones trying to protect you. Safety is worth more than any deal, any object, or any promise. I was 25 in the spring of 2017, working as a veterinary assistant in Dayton, Ohio, and my life felt like a constant game of catch-up. I'd wake before the sun, drive my beat-up Honda Civic to the clinic, spend 10 hours cleaning cages, assisting with surgeries, soothing anxious owners, and go home with cat scratches up my arms and dog hair on my scrubs. Then I'd sit on the couch with a packet of ramen, staring at the unpaid bills stacked on the table. The Civic was the one thing I was proud of. I bought it myself in 2009, a silver model with good mileage, and I babied it. Oil changes on time, tires rotated, no fast food wrappers on the floor. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Selling it felt like letting go of the last piece of stability I had. But rent was due, my student loans weren't waiting, and my bank account was a cruel joke. I couldn't afford pride anymore. Craigslist seemed like the simplest way out. No listing fees, no dealership vultures. Just me, my car, and a buyer. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, taking pictures of the Civic in the parking lot, wiping fingerprints off the dashboard for the photos. I typed out a straightforward ad. 2009 Honda Civic. Reliable, clean, 92K miles, 4,200 OBO. Honest, nothing flashy. The ad went live around noon on a Tuesday. By 2, my inbox was full. Some offers were ridiculous, people promising certified checks from banks in other states or asking me to deliver the car to Florida. Others were clearly scams. I deleted them, shaking my head. But then there was one message that stood out. Short, polite, local area code. Hey, name's Kyle. Saw your Civic. Looks nice. Can we meet this week? I exhaled, relieved. A real person. Finally. I wasn't stupid. I'd heard the stories. Craigslist deals gone wrong, people robbed in parking lots. My friend Mark had once tried to sell his old guitar online and ended up getting ghosted by 3 buyers in a row. He told me, if you're gonna meet someone, do it in a busy lot, bright lights, people around. So that's what I suggested. I emailed Kyle back, told him to meet me at the Kroger parking lot off Wilmington Pike, the one that stayed lit like a stadium even at night. He agreed right away. Thursday evening came, cold air biting at my hands as I parked under a light pole. My Civic looked good in that glow, almost proud. I waited, scanning every car that pulled in. At 7:15, a dark blue SUV rolled up. Tinted windows, engine idling low. A man got out. Hoodie, baseball cap pulled low. He kept his hands in his pockets. You Hannah? He asked. Yeah, I said, my voice tight. He circled the Civic once, crouched by the tires, peeked through the windows. He didn't ask about mileage, history, nothing. Just muttered, yeah, nice car. I'll think about it. And just like that, he slid back into his SUV and drove off. I let out a shaky laugh, feeling stupid for being so tense. Maybe I'd watched too many crime shows. Maybe he was just quiet. But when I pulled out of the lot, I saw the SUV in my rearview mirror. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Dayton wasn't that big, maybe we were headed the same way. But when I turned left, the SUV turned left. When I slowed, it slowed. By the third intersection, dread had crawled into my chest. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tight they hurt. I knew I couldn't go home, not if he was following. I made a sharp right, away from my apartment, heart pounding. The SUV followed, headlights glowing too close. I spotted the bright red sign of a Speedway gas station. Relief surged. I pulled in fast, parking by the pumps where people milled around with coffee cups and gas nozzles. The SUV slowed as it passed, rolling almost to a stop. I couldn't see the driver's face. He just sat there, then rolled on, disappearing into the night. My phone buzzed in my bag. It was Mark. "Hey," I answered, my voice trembling. "You okay?" he asked immediately. I told him everything. The SUV, the following, the way my skin wouldn't stop crawling. He cursed under his breath. "Drive straight to my place. Don't go home alone." I did as he said, every car in my mirror making me flinch. That night, I sat on Mark's couch, trying to convince myself it was just bad luck. But deep down I knew it wasn't over. When I got home the next morning, I checked my email. 2 new messages sat in my inbox, both about the Civic. The first read, "Hey, saw your car. Interested. Can you meet tonight?" The second came 5 minutes later. "Hey, saw your car. Interested. Can you meet tonight?" The emails looked identical, same wording, same punctuation, but the addresses were different by 1 digit. A copy and paste mistake, maybe. Or something else. My stomach dropped. Kyle wasn't alone. I went to the police that afternoon, hands trembling as I explained everything. The SUV, the emails, the feeling of being hunted. The officer nodded, took notes, but his voice was flat. "We've had a few reports like this. Groups using Craigslist to set up sellers. Sometimes they corner people during test drives. We'll file your report." That was it. A shrug, a form, a pat on the back. No follow-up, no phone call. Just me, more alone than before. Weeks later, I spotted a dark SUV parked across from the clinic where I worked. Maybe it wasn't the same one. Maybe I was paranoid. But every time I walked out to my car, my skin prickled. I stopped checking Craigslist, stopped replying to anyone. The Civic sat in the lot, a for sale sign curling on the dashboard, ignored. Eventually I gave up. I drove to a dealership and traded the Civic in for less than it was worth. I lost money, but I gained something else. Peace, however fragile. The first night without it, I sat on my apartment floor staring at the empty space where the Civic had been, and I cried. Not for the car itself, but for what I'd lost with it, the feeling that I could handle things on my own. Craigslist had stripped that illusion away. Now, whenever headlights linger too long in my mirror, my chest tightens. Whenever I see a dark SUV on the street, my palms sweat. The fear never really left. People think danger comes in big moments, muggings in alleys, robberies at gunpoint. But what I learned is that it comes quieter. A message in your inbox. A car that turns when you turn. A stranger who doesn't smile. And once you've felt it, you can't unfeel it. Trust isn't free, and safety isn't guaranteed. When money, desperation, and strangers mix, danger can slip into the most ordinary parts of life. Craigslist and other online marketplaces may seem convenient, but they strip away the walls we rely on. Meeting in public, bringing friends, listening to your instincts. These aren't just precautions, they're lifelines. Because the difference between an ordinary sale and a nightmare can be as thin as the glow of headlights in your rearview mirror. I've always believed that the summer after your first year of college is supposed to feel like a reward. Long nights with friends, road trips, maybe even a summer fling if you're lucky. Mine was nothing like that. By June of 2012, I was 19, back in my hometown of Ridgefield, Washington, and staring down 3 months of boredom. Ridgefield wasn't exactly a hotbed of opportunity. It was small, quiet, and the most exciting thing that had happened in years was when they opened a second coffee shop downtown. Portland State had chewed me up that year. I'd gone off to school thinking I was ready to reinvent myself, ready to conquer the city and finally figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Instead, I ended up lonely, with grades slipping and the gnawing realization that I didn't have a clue what direction my life was headed. My parents never said it out loud, but I knew they were disappointed. They were already stretched thin financially, and I hadn't done them any favors. That's why I started scouring Craigslist one humid evening. I told myself I'd find something quick and easy. I didn't care if it was painting fences or mowing lawns. I just wanted to hand my parents some cash at the end of the week and show them I wasn't useless. That's when I saw it. $400, house sitting, 2 nights only, must be reliable. No pets, no plants, easy money. It sounded too good to be true, but I was 19 and desperate, and too good to be true didn't hold the same weight back then. I clicked the listing, heart racing. The poster's name was Stephen M. He explained he had to leave town for a family emergency and just needed someone to keep an eye on his place. No responsibilities. Just lock the doors and be present. I fired off an email, trying to sound older than I was. Hello, Stephen. My name is Caleb. I'm a college student home for the summer. I'm responsible and available this weekend. Please let me know if you still need someone. I didn't expect a response right away, but 10 minutes later, my inbox pinged. Caleb, thank you for your message. You sound like just the person I need. The house is on North Hill Drive. Please arrive Friday at 7 p.m. I'll go over everything with you. Payment in cash when I return Sunday morning. Stephen. I read it 3 times. $400 for 2 nights. That was more money than I'd ever made in a weekend. I decided not to tell my parents. It wasn't that they'd say no, but I wanted to surprise them with the money, to prove I could handle myself. That Friday, I packed a backpack with some clothes, my phone charger, and a book I'd probably never open. The whole drive over, I rehearsed what I'd say when Stephen asked about me. I wanted to sound responsible, like someone older than a 19-year-old who still didn't know what he wanted in life. North Hill Drive was a neighborhood I barely knew. The houses were spread apart, tucked behind hedges and trees, quiet in a way that made the whole street feel cut off from town. Stephen's house looked normal, if not a little too neat. The lawn was perfectly trimmed, the driveway swept clean. No toys, no garden, no life. When I pulled in, a man stepped out of the front door. Mid-40s, neatly dressed, polite smile. You must be Caleb, he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, almost rehearsed. Yes, sir, I said. Call me Stephen, he replied. Inside, the house was clean but strangely bare. A couch, a coffee table, a single framed photo of a landscape on the wall. It felt like a showroom, not a home. Stephen gave me the rundown. Lock the doors at night. Don't answer the phone unless it's me. And one more thing. My roommate Dennis is downstairs. He works nights, keeps to himself. You probably won't see him. I nodded, though something about his tone made my stomach tighten. By the time Stephen left, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I dropped my bag in the guest room, locked the door, and told myself it was easy money. Just 2 nights. The first few hours went fine. I microwaved a frozen burrito I'd brought, flipped through channels on the TV, and tried not to think about how empty the place felt. Around midnight, I crawled into bed with my phone, scrolling through messages I'd been too embarrassed to answer from college friends who were out living better lives. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, creaking in the hallway outside my door. I froze, holding my breath. My heart slammed against my ribs. The steps stopped just outside my door. The doorknob turned, rattled, as if someone was testing it. "Stephen?" I whispered, voice shaking. No answer. The knob jiggled again, harder this time. Then silence. After what felt like forever, the footsteps retreated. I lay there, every muscle tense, until exhaustion finally dragged me under. By morning, I convinced myself it had to be Dennis. Maybe he'd gotten confused, half asleep. But when I checked the basement door later, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was no lock on my side of the door, just a keyhole with scratches around it, like someone had forced it open before. I shut it quickly and tried to push the image out of my mind. That night, I promised myself I'd keep the TV on, just background noise to make the silence less suffocating. The second night was worse. It started around midnight. I was lying in bed, lights off, when I heard it again. Footsteps in the hallway. Then, soft breathing. Right outside my door. I held my phone like a weapon, though I knew it was useless. My hand hovered over the call button, ready to dial 911. I whispered, "Hello?" The breathing stopped. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. Then came a slow creak. The basement door opening. I jumped out of bed, flung the door open. The hallway was empty, but the basement door stood slightly ajar. Stephen's words echoed in my head. "Dennis keeps to himself. You probably won't see him." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat on the couch with every light on, staring at the basement door until the sun came up. By 4 a.m., I'd had enough. I grabbed my backpack, stuffed my things inside, and walked out without looking back. Later that day, I tried calling Stephen. The number was disconnected. The Craigslist ad had vanished. Curiosity got the better of me. A week later, I drove by the house. It was abandoned. Windows boarded up, front door swinging open. The lawn already growing wild. A neighbor watering her plants across the street glanced at me. "Do you know what happened to the folks who lived there?" I asked. She frowned. "Nobody's lived there in months. Police have been by a few times, strange people going in and out at night." I thanked her, got back in my car, and drove away, my hands shaking. I never told my parents. I couldn't bring myself to. What would I say? That I almost got trapped in an abandoned house by a man who didn't exist? Even now, years later, I think about that weekend. About Stephen's polite smile. About Dennis, if he even existed. About the sound of breathing outside my door. Sometimes when I scroll past a Craigslist ad that promises easy money, I feel my stomach clench. Because I know there are people out there who use those ads as bait. And the worst part? I'll never know who was standing outside my door that night. I used to think my life had a rhythm, a simple, predictable routine. I worked nights at the hardware store in Peoria, Illinois. The store closed at midnight, and by the time I stumbled out into the cool autumn air, my feet ached from standing on concrete all day. My shift ended with half-finished energy drinks rattling in the cup holders of my beat-up Honda Civic, my thoughts wandering somewhere between exhaustion and the faint guilt of being single and alone. I had lived alone for nearly 2 years, ever since my messy breakup with Rachel. Our apartment had felt cozy when we moved in, but after the split, it was nothing but echoes of what I'd lost. Friends faded, and I spent more nights alone than I did talking to anyone who wasn't ringing up at the register. To fill the silence, I started browsing Craigslist. Tools, electronics, free curb alerts. I didn't buy much, mostly I scrolled. It felt like peeking into someone else's life, a quiet voyeurism that distracted me from my own. The week my old TV finally gave out, I felt that void sharply. One minute, I was watching the Cubs game, and the next, the screen froze into a static haze and refused to turn on. Replacement prices were outrageous, and the idea of spending hundreds of dollars made my stomach knot. That's when I turned back to Craigslist, hoping for a deal that was more honest person than scam artist. After scrolling past broken sets, overpriced junk, and sketchy for parts-only listings, I found one that caught my eye. 55-inch Samsung LED TV. Works perfectly. $120. Must pick up. The photo showed a sleek screen in a sparsely decorated room. No cords visible. No wear. I shot off an email. Within 20 minutes, the seller, Jenna H., responded warmly. Almost too warmly. She thanked me for being quick to reply and gave her address in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place that looks safe even under streetlights. Friday night, I closed the store, tossed my hoodie in the back seat, and drove the 15 minutes to the house. The block was tidy, maple trees lining the sidewalk, porch lights glowing faintly in the crisp autumn air. Jenna's house was normal enough, a two-story with slightly faded shutters, a welcome mat, and a garage door that creaked like it hadn't been used in a while. I knocked, and a woman in her mid-30s answered. She smiled, casual, dressed in a sweatshirt and jeans, the kind of approachable look that made me think, maybe this will be fine. "Hi, you must be Logan," she said, holding the door open. "Come in, the TV's upstairs." I hesitated, something in the back of my mind reminding me to be careful. My mom's voice echoed from the past. "Never go into someone's house alone, Logan." But she seemed harmless, calm. Nothing about her screamed danger. I followed her up the stairs, the carpet muffling our steps. She led me into a bedroom and my stomach twisted. The room was empty, blinds drawn, no TV, no furniture, just thin dust covering the floor. Before I could speak, the door slammed behind me. Click, locked. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she'd meant to open another door. Jenna? Wrong room? I rattled the knob. Nothing. Silence filled the room, pressing against my chest. I turned around, taking in the bare walls, the empty floor, the thin layer of dust. My phone showed no signal. Panic prickled at the base of my skull. I tried reasoning with myself. Maybe she'd locked it accidentally or someone was pranking me. Maybe I was overreacting. Then I heard it. A faint voice from the hall. Male voices, low, laughing quietly. It sounded like a few people talking and moving just outside. My chest tightened. "Hello? I'm stuck in here," I shouted, knocking on the door. Silence. Minutes dragged on. My hands shook. I tried calling 911, but no signal. I hit the emergency button on my phone, praying it would work. Then, thinking fast, I opened the alarm app and cranked it to full volume. A piercing siren shrieked in the small room. Footsteps rushed closer. The door burst open and a man in a hoodie stumbled back, surprised. I didn't wait. I shoved past him, barreling down the stairs. At the bottom, Jenna stood, arms crossed, calm as if nothing had happened. My instincts screamed, but adrenaline fueled my legs. I slammed open the front door and tore across the lawn, never looking back until I reached my car. My hands trembled as I started the engine. Heart pounding, I dialed 911 while keeping my eyes on the darkened house. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked. There's someone in a house trying to trap me. I don't know how to explain, but it was a Craigslist ad. Please send someone fast, I said, voice shaking. Police arrived within 10 minutes, but the house was dark and silent. Windows empty, porch lights off. Jenna's ad had been deleted. No one answered. The officers drove around the block, checked inside, and reported nothing unusual. Maybe the house has been abandoned, one said. I nodded numbly, too shaken to argue. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the apartment, every distant car horn, set my nerves on edge. I kept checking the locks, double-checking the doors, jumping at shadows. Weeks passed, but I felt the same unease. One night, leaving the hardware store, I saw a figure leaning against a dark sedan in the far corner of the lot. I froze, heart hammering. By the time I blinked, the figure was gone. The more I thought about the incident, the more I realized I had been lucky. It could have been worse. They could have cornered me in the upstairs room. The siren saved me. Quick thinking saved me. I stopped using Craigslist after that. I avoided the too-good-to-be-true deals, the anonymous sellers with convenient excuses, the houses that seemed normal from the outside. I still remember the fear, the absolute raw panic of being trapped in that empty room. The voices outside the door, the silence when no one answered. the hollow laugh of strangers I'd never see. It changed me. I trust instincts now more than convenience. I lock doors early, I avoid offers that seem perfect, and I tell someone where I'm going, always. Sometimes, even in quiet moments, I imagine that night. The empty house, the locked door, the shadows waiting outside. It reminds me, the world has hidden corners where ordinary things turn dangerous. Craigslist, the internet, even safe neighborhoods, they can hide traps. I was lucky. Not everyone would get out. I never thought moving would feel so heavy. Not in the physical sense. Packing up my clothes and books wasn't difficult, but in the way it pressed on my chest, like the weight of every mistake and disappointment from my past followed me along the 6-hour drive from Kentucky to Cincinnati. I was 22, a senior psychology student, and this transfer was supposed to be a fresh start. New city, new friends, some distance from the chaos of my parents' divorce. I wanted everything to feel clean, organized, like a blank page I could finally write on without fear of smudging the lines. But the closer I got to my move-in date, the heavier the problem of housing pressed down on me. Dorms were completely full and off-campus apartments were way beyond my budget. I spent hours scrolling through listings online, trying to convince myself that I'd find something affordable, furnished, and within walking distance of campus. That night, bleary-eyed from 2 cups of coffee and 3 hours of searching, I found it. The ad read, "Room for rent, close to campus, furnished, affordable, available immediately." The photos looked simple but cozy. A clean bed, a tidy desk, neutral walls. It didn't scream perfection, but it didn't look fake either. My heart thudded as I emailed the landlord, Robert Hale. The response came within minutes. Polite, professional, reassuring. "You seem like the right fit," he said. That small sentence carried more weight than I expected. There was one catch, and it should have been a warning bell loud enough to set off the whole city. He wanted first and last month's rent wired up front to hold the room. I hesitated, my gut twisted. I had read horror stories, students losing thousands of dollars to fake landlords. My logical brain screamed, "Don't do it." But exhaustion, anxiety, and desperation drowned out the alarm bells. He was patient, polite, almost apologetic, and he even sent what looked like a legitimate lease agreement. After a long night of deliberation, I convinced myself it was safe and wired the money. I slept for 3 hours that night, tossing and turning, trying to convince myself I wasn't naive. I repeated mantras like, "It's fine, it's legitimate, you're careful." The next morning, I packed my car, books, clothes, toiletries, a few personal decorations for my new room. I told myself I was prepared for anything, except disappointment. The drive to Cincinnati should have been a relief, but it felt like a march into uncertainty. I kept glancing at the GPS, trying to commit the route to memory, my hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly. By mid-afternoon, I pulled up to 214 Mapleview Lane, a modest beige house tucked into a quiet neighborhood. The streets were lined with mature trees and neighbors waved from driveways, making the area seem friendly and safe. I rang the doorbell. A middle-aged woman opened the door, brow furrowed in confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked. I'm here about the room for rent." My voice came out shakier than I intended. Her eyes widened. "There's no room here. My husband and I own this house. We've lived here 15 years. I froze. My stomach sank. There must be some mistake. "Robert Hale. Craigslist," he said. My words tumbled over one another. She shook her head. "I don't know anyone by that name. Are you sure you have the right address?" My hands went cold. I fumbled for my phone. No answer. No connection. The email had bounced back. The Craigslist ad was gone. For a moment, I thought I might be dreaming, but the sharp edges of reality cut through. I had no apartment, no money, classes starting in 3 days. I parked my car near campus, trying to think. Sleeping in my car became the temporary solution. I curled up in the driver's seat, using my backpack as a pillow, and tried to ignore the exhaustion that made my back ache and my eyes sting. Mornings, I used the gym bathrooms to wash up, hoping no one would notice. I told myself it was temporary, but every passing hour made the city feel colder, harsher. Days passed and I was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. My friends from Kentucky tried to check in, but I couldn't tell them. How could I explain that a Craigslist ad had left me penniless and homeless? Every knock on my car window or passerby felt like judgment, a reminder that I had failed to protect myself. I researched everything I could about Craigslist rental scams. Patterns emerged. Fake landlords, fake lease agreements, stolen identities. One detective called it a game of desperation, preying on students who needed housing immediately. I realized with a sinking feeling that I had been targeted because of timing and urgency, my vulnerability as a transfer student who had nowhere else to go. I went to the police. At first they shrugged. Craigslist scams are common, one officer said. Money transfers are tough to trace. I nodded, fighting the urge to cry. But I documented everything, the emails, the wire transfer, the screenshots. Weeks later, a detective from the cybercrime unit called. They had uncovered a network of fraudulent rental ads across multiple states using aliases like Robert Hale. My money had gone into the pockets of professional scammers. Recovering some of the money took months. I finally found a legitimate apartment with roommates, though the relief was muted by lingering fear. The experience left me hypervigilant. Every lock, every email, every offer too good to be true was scrutinized. I double-checked identities, called landlords on multiple numbers, visited in person before transferring a single cent. Even with the apartment secured, shadows lingered. I drove past Mapleview Lane months later, heart thudding at the familiar street. The house was normal, tidy, neighbors waving as though nothing had happened. But in my mind I imagined Robert watching, waiting for the next student desperate enough to respond. Desperation can blind you, and trust without verification can cost more than money. It can cost your sense of safety. I never used Craigslist for housing again. I warned friends, shared my story, but I knew some would still take risks. Sometimes when I walk past off-campus housing or see a room for rent ad, my stomach tightens. I remember the feeling of helplessness, the sting of betrayal, the nights spent curled up in my car. I also remember the moment I decided to fight back, documenting, reporting, learning to protect myself. That choice, small as it seemed at the time, made all the difference.